let's touch first of all on arms sales. An interesting move by the Biden administration. It's ordered a hold on UAE and Saudi arms sales and put them under review. Now, this used to be a case of the US considering, these countries. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Is that changing?
Right. Thanks for having me, Tom. And as always, thanks for mentioning my U.S. Navy Reserve affiliation. As I'm not on duty, a reminder that these views are my own. Yes, you pointed out the UAE and Saudi arms sales are under review. The broader picture here, and you'll notice the new Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, noted that all arms sales are under review. The headline is definitely on these two because they're very significant, over $23 billion, and they were a cornerstone of the Trump administration's overall peace process where they were trying to bring the UAE and Saudi closer to the U.S. as they named Iran as the strongest enemy of the United States. So it was a cornerstone of the foreign policy. What you're seeing here is both an example of something that's similar in the United States when there's a presidential transition, that they're going to conduct a review. And you'll see a lot of these headlines about reviews of policy that will show, hey, this is normal. Of course, we're going to review this. We're going to see if it's in our national interests. But the thing to look out for will be if they back off from those arms sales, as you mentioned, does it have an effect on the policy that was created by the Trump administration? So what you'll hear is this still in our national interests? There's a lot of bipartisan support for moving back in the Congress, for example, for moving back and rolling back some of this support for Saudi Arabia based on some of the human rights issues that we've seen over the last 4 years in Yemen with the death of Jamal Khashoggi and other issues. So TBD, but we will see that determination and some of those words change about the relationship between Saudi and the UAE and the U.S.
All right, one to keep an eye on. NATO, the military committee met this week. Joe Biden did actually publish some snippets of the phone call. I'm not sure whether we can say definitively what went on from those snippets because they're selected, of course. But this was an interesting relationship during the time of Trump. He was really pushing NATO to do more itself. Perhaps the US was going to further withdraw, and what would that do for Russia's control of the region? What have you made of the Biden move so far in this area?
Right. So as you mentioned, Tom, it's very unusual to even see or hear clips of a phone call that a U.S. president has with a foreign leader or foreign leaders in general. And this is a first, as far as I know, of actually showing a video of the call between the two. Of course, it is between the Secretary General of NATO, so one that would be a relatively scripted conversation, particularly here when President Biden would be reaffirming the U.S. commitment to NATO. And so the point here, I believe, as I understand, is they wanted to show President Biden in a video reaffirming the U.S. commitment to Article 5 of NATO, which, of course, is the famous attack on one is an attack on all, and just wanted to show that he was saying that and have the power of seeing that on video. Other than that, a relatively scripted conversation. But it does show that and one of the words that Biden said is that the very beginning of this renewal of relationships with allies is NATO. He said, I'm starting with the NATO alliance. So trying to show that that's his number one preference. So those two things were something coming out of the call, besides the fact, and I did note that apparently the White House did edit the call, as you said, and then both sides agreed to the content before it put out. So maybe this will be a new normal. We'll see.
Yeah, it does make you miss the unscripted stuff because, what we get out of these meetings is we sort of go there, that's fine, what really happened. Hey, Taiwan, I mean, Hong Kong for the last few years has been the big story of China's intent and aggression, if you like. Taiwan's the story now, and it's a very different one because Hong Kong was always this part of China. Taiwan, China claims it is, but Taiwan has an independent government and wants no part of it. What did you make of the military deployment, the flyover, and the reaction in particular so far from the US?
Right. As a naval officer who spent time on submarines and a lot of good friends still deployed, we're very mindful that when our naval vessels move, they're not just for practical purpose. They are also symbols. They're symbols of diplomacy. And right now, the U.S. movements, the Theodore Roosevelt aircraft carrier having just come in, the new defense secretary having just been confirmed, Lloyd Austin, in the U.S., the timing of this is China sending warships toward Taiwan and also 25 aircraft this past week within the Taiwan's air identification zone, which is a step toward actually getting toward Taiwan territory. So definitely symbols on both sides. A reminder of this term we've talked about these last couple of years, which is the gray zone. China is expertly operating in the gray zone, which is they ratchet up, get a little bit closer to confrontation, but do it in such a way that it isn't that much further than what they did last time. So we're going to see a war of words more than we'll see an actual military conflict. But you saw that Linda Reynolds came back here in Australia and urged sort of constraint and peace. That's a good thing. But I would also offer that, Hong Kong in some ways was resolved peacefully from China's perspective and from the US and Australia perspective, because there weren't that many, there weren't international shots fired over it. But Hong Kong is certainly in a place where China has a tight grip on it. So China might be looking for the same example of Taiwan, where we urged constraint and peace, but it's sort of a constraint and peace that goes China's way in the gray zone. So that's what to look out for.